Good evening and welcome to our full council meeting. I would first like to move to agenda item 1, which is welcome and safety information. Welcome to today's extraordinary full council meeting. Welcome also to the members of the public who are watching this via our YouTube channel. Councillors, please be mindful of the etiquette guidance that has been issued, which will ensure that you can be viewed and understood by members of the public watching from home. May I please remind everyone to behave with due courtesy, tolerance, and respect for one another's views and conduct themselves in a reasonable way. At this meeting, named votes will also take place by way of a roll call. Councillors have been provided with guidance on how to help the roll call take place as smoothly as possible. Now we move to the agenda. I'd now like to move to agenda item 2, apologies for absence. I have received apologies from the following councillors: Councillor English, Councillor Rippington, and Councillor Steve Smith will be joining us later on in the meeting when he's able. Do I have apologies from anybody else? Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Liz Radford, my Lord Mayor, will be a little bit late.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, I didn't see you indicating there, Councillor Weston. Thank you. I'd now like to move to agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Can I ask, please, whether any councillors have any interest to declare regarding the items on today's agenda?
Yes, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Bradshaw.
Lord Mayor, I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest in that I am a council-appointed non-executive director of Bristol Holdings Limited and Bristol Heat Networks Limited.
Thank you very much. Do I have any other councillors wishing to declare?
Yes, my Lord Mayor.
Councillor Brooke.
Yeah, I'm another non-pecuniary interest. I'm the council-appointed director of the Bristol Waste Company.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other councillors? Councillor Gollop.
Lord Mayor, I should declare that in my role as Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Management, I sit as an observer on the Shareholder Advisory Group. Whilst I have no pecuniary interest, members need to be aware that I cannot speak on matters that I have heard in confidence that are not in the public domain, even where they are relevant to the matters discussed at this evening's meeting.
Thank you very much indeed. Do we have any other councillors who wish to declare an interest?
Yes, my Lord Mayor.
Councillor Pearce.
I have a non-pecuniary interest. I am a council nominated director on the board of BE 2020 Limited.
Thank you very much indeed. I believe Councillor Alexander, you wish to declare an interest?
I do, Lord Mayor. Similarly, I am a council appointed director on Gorham Homes, which is non-pecuniary again. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Again, can I ask if anybody wishes to declare an interest? Okay, thank you very much indeed. We will now move on. I'd now like to move to agenda item 4, public forum. At this extraordinary meeting, we will hear first from members of the public and then from councillors. There is a 30-minute limit to public forum as outlined in the Constitution, and it has been agreed for this meeting to hear all those registered to speak, which may run over by a few minutes. Details of the statements and questions received have been published on our website, and members of the public who have registered to speak are currently watching on YouTube and in the waiting room for this meeting. I will outline the following for them. You will be permitted to enter the meeting from the waiting room, and you will be put on mute immediately. When I call you, please unmute yourself. If there is a technical issue or a problem admitting people to the meeting, we will move on to the next person and return afterwards, and please bear with us. When the exchange is finished, you will leave the meeting and the next person will be called. If you have further public forum, you will remain and asked to remain on mute. In the event of any disruption, I will give 2 warnings before that person is removed from the meeting so that the meeting can continue. There are no petitions in relation to this motion, so we will move straight to the public statements that we have received. There are a total of 5 public statements received, a list of which will be displayed on the screen now. 4 members of the public have indicated that they wish to speak to their statements. These are indicated on the list on the screen, and we will run through them in order. I will invite each person to speak to their statement for 1 minute. Please do summarise, and please bear in mind that all statements were sent to councillors in advance of this meeting. I would first like to go to PS01, Clive Stevens. Welcome back after such a short time. And if you'd like to speak to your statement, Clive. Thank you.
Hello. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for your kind messages on my retirement. They perked me up, you know. Secondly, this motion. It could have been so much better, but better local democracy was ruled out of order, yet again. Councils make bad decisions when they have poor scrutiny processes, whether it's policy development, pre-decision or value for money. Councillor Khan writes that Bristol's scrutiny is getting worse. If so, taxpayers should expect more expensive mistakes. The Mayor has consistently said scrutiny is down to councillors. Take him at his word and not his assistants. So, to summarise, if you're prevented from improving scrutiny today, then please put it number 1 on your agenda for next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd now like to move to PS02. Suzanne Audrey, would you like to speak to your statement, please, Suzanne? You have 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you. It was worrying to read the Grant Thornton's review of governance arrangements for Bristol City Council's subsidiaries, which suggested that members of Cabinet and Scrutiny were not fully informed when decisions were being taken about Bristol Energy. It looks as if the elected mayor, senior officers and Cabinet members accepted a process that was described by the auditor as inadequate. But in response to a recent question at Audit Committee, I gained the impression from the monitoring officer that he didn't believe any changes were necessary. I hope that I've misunderstood this, given the considerable financial losses to the city from expenditure on Bristol Energy, and in response to the concerns of the auditor, it would be really helpful to know what new measures and processes are in place to improve transparency, scrutiny and risk management. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to move to PS03, Murch Clark. You have 1 minute to speak to your statement, Murch. Thank you.
I hope you've had the opportunity to read my statement. What do you do with a company facing high losses? You make sure you have enough dispassionate and informed people involved in the decision-making process to make the tough calls. In the case of Bristol Energy, too few people with potentially 2 similar viewpoints were tasked with solving a hugely difficult and, as it turns out, massively expensive problem. People who potentially could have challenged and brought forward other viewpoints were not given sufficient information to engage in the process. Suggestions that did not align with political aspirations were not pursued. I made some suggestions in my paper on the composition and power of the shareholder group and the recruitment of the executive director of Bristol Holdings. Finally, going forward, it is imperative that all council-owned companies are properly scrutinised, which means elected representatives must have access to the information necessary to undertake this duty. Bristol Holding Company cannot be used as a block to information. Transparency is key to effective government. I look forward to seeing action on the auditor's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to move to PS05, Caroline Gooch. If you'd like to speak to your statement, you have 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Joss. Firstly, looking through the history of Bristol Energy, it seems that even as early as beginning of 2018, there were issues with the business plan. And back in 2019, the Overview and Scrutiny Board raised issues about it, and 4 out of 7 said at that point that there were too many risks to continue funding. The recent auditor has said that there seems to be a lack of proper information given to the councillors, and there seems to be a lack of viability. As a council taxpayer, I'm very concerned, obviously, about the £50 million that's been spent on this. That represents over 24,000 Bandy council taxpayers, which is an incredible amount of money, and is more than the
close now, please. Thank you.
So yes, I think we deserve a thorough investigation into the decision making behind this venture.
Thank you very much indeed. That concludes the statements received from members of the public. We will now move on to the statements from councillors. The list of those received have been shared on the screen. 3 councillors have submitted statements, and I will invite each councillor to speak to their statement for a maximum of 1 minute. I'd like to move to CS01. Councillor Khan, you have 1 minute to speak to your statement. Thank you.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. My Lord Mayor, the statement speaks for itself, and the report speaks for itself. It is a damning report, and unfortunate as though that we are heading towards a big loss. This is not City Council loss. This is not councillors' loss. This is people of this city's loss. Amount of services that could have been bought with this money that we lost, that's huge. That's huge. And we are failing the city on this. And the governance, in terms of governance, my Lord Mayor, I mean, we know, unfortunately, I have to say, over the last 4 years, the governance in terms of the administration and in terms of these
close, please.
Holdings, it's unbelievable. So, of course,
can you draw to a close now, please?
And the statement speaks for itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to move to CS02. Councillor Gollop, you have 1 minute to speak to your statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My concerns and those of overview and scrutiny management are not something that's just happened. These concerns have been expressed for more than 3 years and across all 4 parties, including the Labour Party. Most of this has been done behind closed doors, so I felt a timeline might be helpful to remind people. This list is far from complete, but it covers key dates and is clear evidence of concerns over a long period of time. Notable that the Mayor and Deputy Mayor ignored scrutiny comments completely in April 19 when the 1920 business plan was approved by Cabinet. Just pick out some of these dates. November 17, concerns about governance. July 18, note to shareholder group regarding continued lack of information. August 18, statement to OSM members, which said the item relating to Bristol Energy is so confidential that no detail is provided in the Cabinet papers.
Could you draw to a close now, please?
So, my Lord Mayor, on the 1st of April 2019, 4 members of OSM believe there were too many risks to the council in continuing to fund BE. 3 members believe there was no alternative. My Lord Mayor, the list goes on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to move to CS03. Councillor Hopkins, you have 1 minute. Thank you. Councillor, we can't hear you. You don't appear to be.
I have.
Thanks, that's better. Councillor, can you? Yep, thank you.
Yeah. Bristol Waste doesn't appear to be troublesome in comparison to Bristol Energy, but there are problems. We've all received lobbying from the trade union involved to express their concerns about being transferred from Bristol City Council. Bristol Waste started off with a golden inheritance due to some wonderful work by the previous chief executive officer, who had been a long-term servant of this council. Her departure has actually caused considerable concern to a number of people. And it's no wonder that the staff now are very concerned about them being transferred from the council employment to Bristol Energy. Bristol Waste has the opportunity to, in actual fact, get in commercial business. Instead of that, we seem to be in a position where staff
to close now, please. Thank you.
Certainly, where staff are being transferred, where the future terms and conditions will be reduced. That is not the purpose of a tech-oil company. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Council is asked to receive and note these statements, which I have also referred to the Mayor for his information and consideration. We will now move to the public questions received. Please note that the questions have been published on the website and a list is shared on screen now. 3 members of the public have submitted questions and all 3 have indicated that they wish to attend the meeting. We will run through these in order. Each participant is asked to read their question out and the Mayor will reply verbally. Following the Mayor's response, the participant can ask a supplementary question. And now we turn to Suzanne Aubrey, PQ01. If you could ask your question to the Mayor, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So given my statement, please can you give details of specific changes that have been made to improve transparency, scrutiny and governance and risk management of Bristol City Council's subsidiary companies? And by that, I mean real changes, not business as usual. Thank you.
So as was published in the management response to the report, which by the way, covers a period from April 19 to March 2020. So a very short period of time within Bristol Energy. We said we accept the recommendations in the report and put them against the timeline to delivery. But in light of your statement, it is important, I think, that we recognise that the report is actually limiting to on governance. It doesn't talk about the performance of the company and doesn't talk about the relationship between governance and that performance. And one of the problems the report does not address is the fact that many of these governance issues were built into the very birth of this company, in that you have a local authority with a commitment to transparency, launching an energy company in a volatile market where transparency over decision-making within that company would leave it at a disadvantage with its competitors. There's an inherent tension in that. And I've looked back, and in the name of governance, actually, in the name of records, we've actually had a look back at the documents surrounding the birth of Bristol Energy and can't actually find a record of any meaningful conversations about the inherent tension between of a local authority owning a private company in a volatile and, dare I say, carnivorous commercial market. It's just not been addressed. As with so many of the problems that we've picked up since May 2016, it was something that was bundled up, tucked away and left for us to pick up again. And that's a real shame. If we're going to do the city a real service here, we need to not just deal with headlines, and superficial analysis, but we really need to look at the full history of this company and actually begin to recognise that the biggest error made was actually putting Bristol City Council into the energy business in the first place.
Suzanne, do you have a supplementary question for the Mayor?
Yes, I do feel there's a slight imbalance there. I didn't hear an answer to my question. So Marvin, could you just give me one thing that's new, that's going to change? So it'd be a new thing that's happening as a result of the Grant Thornton report. And I know you've got a lot more to say, and hopefully that will come out in the debate, but could you answer my question?
Well, as I said, we've taken all the recommendations on.
No,
we're allowing.
If you would just allow the Mayor to respond, thank you.
We're saying if the councillors want to form a new committee, for example, to look over the companies, then they're absolutely free to do so. We can have as many councillor committees as we would like. The point we're making is understanding the nature of the challenge is actually key to getting the right kind of solution. And at the moment, there's a focus on council committees without looking at which the inherent challenge in governance, which is with a local authority owning a company in the energy business, which is a very expensive business to get into, to operate in, and to exit from, with an overly optimistic business plan in the first instance that actually, and we look at the recordings of those cabinet meetings, dismissed concerns raised at the time about the level of risk the council was being exposed to.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to move to, I'm going to take these separately because I think they've been, the questions are channeled at different people. So we'll move to PQ02. Caroline Gooch, if you'd like to ask your first question to the Mayor, please. Thank you.
Hi. When did you first become aware that Bristol Energy was unlikely to make a profit?
So the original business plan signed off in 2015 by the Coalition Cabinet had the company making losses until at least 2018-19 before what it predicted was going on to be the most successful energy company in the country. So the fact that there were losses was something that was built into the business plan.
Right, and so it wasn't going to make it was supposed to start making gains in 2018, but at that point it clearly wasn't. So why did it take until 2020 to wind the company up?
So you think about the process here and think about the timeline. You've got a business plan signed off by a coalition cabinet, checked by private companies that said this is going to be the most successful, the biggest returning energy company in the country. A brand new company, business plan signed off in 2015, company launched in February 2016. It's bedding in at that time. So you come in as an administration, it takes time to actually begin to see that business plan. You don't know after 3 months that the business plan isn't working. It takes some time for that business plan to reveal itself. So that's when you start the investigation. After, say, 9-10 months, you recognize the business plan, despite being signed off by the head of finance in the previous administration, is not actually as strong as we and the city was led to believe when that initial tranche of money was committed to Bristol Energy in the first instance. Now you're on the locomotive because you're in the energy business. It takes time to understand that business plan. You've got to investigate that business plan and find out why is there such a gap between the promise of having the most successful energy company in the country and what appears to be an underperformance. Then you get your experts in to say, well, actually it's underperforming, but can we correct this? Can we avoid crystallizing the money that's already been, the losses already assigned to the energy company, and turn this around and make sure that it is actually delivering? Is this a blip or is this a fundamental problem? That isn't done quickly. It's a very volatile market. It's a very complicated market. And by its very nature, it's a very expensive market to operate in. So throwing the numbers around is great. If we'd have been put into the nursery business, as we do have, it wouldn't have been expensive. But this is a very complicated market to understand. We were put into it and we had to operate in it. So, but we go down the path of trying to sort the company out, trying to find solutions. You can't do that overnight, and you can't. And the other challenge is if you just depart from the energy market, that also comes with incredible costs as well. And actually, dare I say, again, people talking the company down doesn't help with the end sale price either. So that makes it a challenge. But as soon as we found an opportunity to exit from the market, realizing that there wasn't with the passing of the opportunity with City League to make this work for the city, we took it and did the best possible deal we could with the city's resources.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to move to PQ03. Caroline, I believe you're directed that question to the cabinet member. Yeah. So if you'd like to ask your question, and I don't know whether the mayor or a cabinet member will be picking this up. If you'd like to ask your question, thank you.
Okay, so
I'll take the question, Lord Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So my second question is, when did the internal auditors first make the cabinet aware that there was a financial risk to the council?
I think there might be a bit of a misunderstanding of the role of the auditors. So the role of internal audit is to provide an independent assurance that our organisation's risk management, governance, and internal control processes are operating, effectively, rather than audit specific investments. But in terms of risk, there's always a risk in entering into these in any business and these types of business, and there's a particular risk. And for those of the councillors that are in the board of business, and I'm looking at a few faces now that I know have business experience, to enter into the energy business comes with significant risk. And there is a line, as you all have, I'm sure everyone's pored over the report, that talks about this being a volatile market. Business energy companies going out of business in a whole block of them went out of business in a very short space of time. Changes in the prices of energy supply as well. Companies with lost leaders as well in the competitive market. It was a wrong market to put a local authority into. There was a lot of groupthink. There was a lot of optimism about this is going to be the pathway to solving fuel poverty within the city. There was a lot of groupthink, and you can read all the original papers about this is going to be a revenue raiser for the local authority. But the truth of it is there's an inherent risk in it. And Bristol City Council was signed up to participate in a very volatile, high risk market. And it was the wrong market for the City Council to be put into. So we've always known there was risk.
Thank you. Caroline, would you like to ask a supplementary of the mayor?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from you is you saying that you knew that there was a risk, but you pressed on regardless. Is that true?
No, I think it's really important to actually hear what I did say. Yes, we know there's a risk, but by definition, we pressed on. You don't stop in business because you face a risk. Otherwise, no one would ever start a business, would they? Every business contains risk. The question is, what business risk do you go into? The challenge of being in the energy business is, and the truth is, there was no step-off point with Bristol Energy, which you could just step out the market and draw a line under it and move on. Every junction of decision-making for Bristol Energy involves cost. Leaving the market involves cost at every stage. So I know people are trying to put £50 million in the public domain. To be honest, I will share with you that the head of, well, I won't say who, someone in our finance team says the reason you're using the term 50 million is because you don't actually understand finance. It's not 50 million, it's far from that. But the point is that number doesn't even sit in an abstract, because actually you've got to look at the difference between the price of exiting the market at any time and that final cost loss that we have. So it's not 40 million in abstract. Now, again, I'm not expecting anyone to do the additional thinking of covering that, but that's the truth of it. There's a cost to every point of exiting. We were put into the wrong market. There was groupthink. Go back, watch the YouTube videos of Cabinet discussing moving into launching Bristol Energy. Look at the specific question where someone asked, are we taking the risks of entering into this business seriously enough? And look at the Cabinet lead, the Deputy Mayor, dismiss that question. all right, not give it the level of seriousness it deserved. And if it had been taken as seriously as it should have been, perhaps we wouldn't, as a city, have launched an energy company to go into a volatile market that ultimately did not do well for the city of Bristol. But it was just one of a number of problems we picked up when we came in, alongside the finances of Bristol City Council and alongside the financial debacle of the arena, which if we had pressed ahead with it, would be trying to open the arena up in the middle of a pandemic, which would be a £200 million disaster.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to move on to PQ04. Murch, would you like to ask your first question of the Mayor, please? Thank you.
Between 2016 and today, how much money has been spent on external consultants looking at Bristol Energy by Bristol City Council, Bristol Holding Company and Bristol Energy?
So I'm just finalising. What I'm going to do with that one is to get a written response to you with the final number.
Okay, that's fine. The reason I'm interested in that is that I obviously understand, and I take what you say, is that running a retail energy company isn't straightforward. And, you know, and it seems reasonable that you'd have taken external advice. However, picking up one of the comments that was in the audit report, did any of these consultations suggest selling Bristol Energy beforehand? And if so, when and why, you know, weren't these avenues pursued?
No, they didn't. And the point was that there were some options discussed, and we just talked about them all. If you go for a fire sale too early, you crystallise your losses. And then actually as a city, I'd imagine many councillors in Bristol will be saying, hold on, we got a business plan that says this is the most profitable energy company in the country. Why are you selling it? Is this just about you trying to get at the previous administration? Which we wouldn't have made a decision on that basis anyway. But no, it was about how can we, what can we do with the company to look for opportunities to turn it around. But you are right. Again, this is another point I make. The energy company is an expensive business. We do not have expertise within Bristol City Council to run the energy business. I dare say that amongst the 70 councillors in Bristol, many of them wouldn't try and hire themselves out as consultants to advise energy companies in any part of this country or this world, because the expertise is not here. But once you have an energy business, right, that's like you have to get in the people with the expertise to help you make decisions about how, you know, to operate in the energy market. Energy is not a cheap place to be. I don't want to do it, but if you take a sports image, you know, we got put into the Premiership, right? We have to pay Premiership wages to stay there, otherwise it just doesn't work. Now we didn't choose to be in this market, but having been put in the market, we have to go out and find the expertise to help us navigate that market. And it's not easy, it's not cheap, it's very complicated. And dare I say, this has been one of the headaches that we've been left in to deal with since May 16.
Yeah, I think my
thank you, Murch. Would you like to ask your second question, please, of the Mayor? Thank you.
Okay, so my second question is, what is the net operating cost of Bristol Holding Company between 2016 and today?
So for 2020-21, the budget set for the holding company was £608,000, with £407,000 for employees and £201,000 for services provided by the council to Bristol Holding Group, such as insurance, finance, ICT, and legal. And the full financial performance of the holding company is publicly available on their annual accounts.
Murch, do you have a supplementary for the Mayor?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to understand the benefit of the value for money of Bristol Holding Company, because it seems to be one of the barriers to getting information, you know, freedom of information requests and such like. So how would you explain the value of Bristol Holding Company to the people of Bristol?
It's just about better managing, you know, a better system for managing our companies. And we went through that change at the beginning when, again, I was being called to go into shareholder meetings, or like very long shareholder meetings, almost once a month. And the point was, we weren't elected just to have an energy company. We were elected to get houses, to tackle child hunger, to give us a sustainable future, to tackle domestic violence, all the rest of it. And such a large portion of my time was spent with the companies. So obviously working closely with Councillor Cheney, looking at the whole structure, a holding company gave us an opportunity to restructure that line of ownership and governance and leadership of the companies. And I think it was a good decision that we made. Certainly the structure we inherited was not up to the task.
Thank you very much indeed. That concludes the questions received from members of the public. No questions were received from members of council. Written replies written replies will be published on the website within 10 working days. Thank you very much. I'd now like to move to agenda item 5, executive decision making and scrutiny of council-owned companies. Please may I ask Councillor Hopkins of the Liberal Democrat Group to move the motion. Councillor, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Clearly, we have something that's gone massively wrong, and enacting the comments and recommendations from our independent auditors will not solve everything, but it is absolutely essential that this is actually done. And I actually watched the audit committee when the member of the public who spoke earlier actually put the question of exactly what's going to change. I read the responses from the management, and it's clear that there was not a recognition that there needed to be massive change. So I would ask all members present here today not just to actually acquiesce in voting for this absolutely necessary report and action, but to actually think about what went wrong. We had rose-tinted glasses from the previous mayor in setting this company up, but what he actually committed to was spending of about £4 million. There was a budget to spend more, and there was a hope that there would be a return in the long term after initial setup costs and initial build-up costs. But quite frankly, it was obvious very early in this administration that there wasn't a grip on what was actually going on. And for several years, it was obvious that there was floundering. And really, to try and put all the blame on the previous mayor, despite the fact that he was a bit over-optimistic, is quite ludicrous. It's during this administration that £50 million was lost. The company had not even started operating when the present mayor actually took over. And that is, I think, tells you what you need to know about who's responsible for this position. The auditors, I think, were quite shocked. They put their comments politely, but the secrecy, the way that this has actually been done, and the lack of accountability. I actually asked for 2 reports to be published to go along with this meeting from Ernst & Young. The first one has been published, and that gives some concerns in itself that what was actually contained in it. The second one actually highlighted, amongst other things, a number of the things that were going wrong within Bristol Energy and why we'd lost 50 million quid, rather than, because the previous mayor had decided it was a good idea to have the
You have 20 seconds left, Councillor. Thank you.
Quite frightening. So I would say to everybody here today that it's an absolute minimum that we actually accept what our independent auditors say, but we must do more. I take on board the comments from ex-councillor.
Can you draw to a close, please?
Thank you. And we will happily want to move on to do more, but this meeting has a simple purpose: to make certain.
Can you draw to a close, please? Thank you.
Thank you. That these recommendations are enacted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group to second the motion. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. The report itself makes pretty grim reading, and it's pretty tough. We can all play a blame game another night as far as I'm concerned, but the findings are worrying in the report. Councillor Hopkins is correct that it's written politely. It uses inadequate is a term, but actually I think when you look underneath it, it pulls out a lot of concerns that we've been having for some time when it comes to access to information, transparency, and actually whether the cabinet has the information it should have. And those are the elements that are so damning. And if you read the report itself, when you go through and you highlight the concerns, and it talks about cabinet was not made aware of concerns raised to the shareholder group, which is there to advise them. The public papers do not include risk assessments. Information is out of date when it comes to decision making. Information is buried, so its messages are more difficult to consider. It then talks about the overly unrealistic view of how Bristol Energy might perform or the potential success of City Leap. How meetings are not routinely published and minutes not routinely held and kept. It's pretty stark stuff. And the problem we've got is if we don't learn the lessons of this, we will be doomed to repeat them because we have similar ventures with similar transparency issues with also large amounts of money. Waste, the holding company, Gorham, Leap, the Colston Beacon project, all of these have potential to be real headaches. So what the motion here today is about ensuring that councillors know what's going on. The mayor earlier on spoke about talking the company down. Now, we were actually advised not to air our concerns because we might talk the company down, which means we end up in a cycle where you can't express concern about what's happening for fear of what might happen if you do express concern. I think the cold, hard light of day is what we need. We need transparency. So what's the suggestion here today is commitment to enact all 12 recommendations, but also set up a panel, a representative panel. So Labour have a majority, they will have a majority on the panel, but has access to that exempt information. And this is very similar to what the audit committee have been calling for some time as well. This is about getting a better process so we're not doomed to repeat the failings that we've seen on this project, but we might well see on other projects as well. We have to get it right, and that means we need transparency. And I hope colleagues today
20
will vote for
seconds
this.
left, Councillor.
Yeah, I will finish early, my Lord Mayor. We'll vote for this motion today. I hope it is uncontroversial. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. We will now move to speakers on the motion. I'd now like to call Councillor Cheney to speak on behalf of the Labour Group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. When a local authority steps into a highly commercial marketplace, it creates a tension for itself. On the one hand, you have an absolute need to protect the taxpayer's investment by ensuring you concede no competitive advantage to others. On the other, you have the obvious need for transparency in decision making. Treading that line is incredibly difficult and puts those charged with protecting the council's investments in a very tough place. It's worth pointing out that throughout we have taken all decisions through scrutiny before Cabinet and have tried to be as frank as possible with the problems whilst trying to stay on that tightrope. Over a number of years, a number of senior officers and councillors were spending a significant amount of time reviewing every aspect of performance of the council's companies. These officers clearly have day jobs to do that also involve big sums of money and resource, and it was felt that we just needed more capacity to oversee some of this. So we spent some time thinking and discussing how that might work better and decided that a dedicated resource, Bristol Holding Company, would be stood up to do some of that heavy lifting, reviewing the monthly performance targets, the management accounts, and so on. The holding company executive will report to the holding company board of directors, who will provide another layer of scrutiny. Remembering that all of this is happening on top of the company executive and the boards and directors of the individual companies themselves, the latter having challenged the former on the robustness of their work. All this would allow the shareholder group within the council to focus much more on strategic elements and decisions, having assurance that the heavy lifting had already been done. This decision itself went both through scrutiny and cabinet at the time, and a good debate was had. This new governance structure gave us confidence that what was coming through to us had been thoroughly scrutinised. The Grant Thornton paper looked at why a decision taken by Cabinet to approve a Bristol Energy business plan in January 2020 was proved unachievable within only a few days. For me, this is actually proof of the value of the holding company and the new structure, who saw the problem and reacted quickly and have since been instrumental in the accelerated sale process of Bristol Energy. The GT report itself makes 12 recommendations, and we've already created a management action plan to address those issues, which was taken to audit committee a few weeks ago. Contrary to what was said earlier, it is worth noting that this action plan was commended by Grant Thornton at that meeting, and also worth pointing out that the Grant Thornton report itself acknowledges that not all exempt papers should or can be seen by the audit committee. There are things in this motion today which I absolutely refute, but the general thrust, that which we follow through on the recommendations from Grant Thornton, is something that we are absolutely committed to. Similarly, a cross-party group of councillors tasked with overseeing this is a strong idea and one which we're happy to support. So we will be supporting the motion, but with caveats that some of the hyperbole within it isn't accurate or indeed fair. Of course, none of this has been easy. Of course, no one wanted this outcome. We have worked incredibly hard to try and turn around an incredibly difficult situation. And whilst government improvements will occur, these would not have changed the hugely challenging marketplace that we find ourselves in.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Gollop to speak on behalf of the Conservative group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My Lord Mayor, what a sorry tale. Any one of these issues could have been attributed to administrative error, but the long list is actually quite frightening. But can I just start by saying I welcome Councillor Cheney's agreement to the motion. I think it's important that we work together to get the best outcomes that we can. And I think that's a really positive step. I'm concerned that whilst the Deputy Mayor is engaging that, the Mayor is continuing in denial. And I would just like to put on record that, yes, the energy company started trading under the previous administration for 3 months. It traded under the current administration for 53 months until the trade was sold in a fire sale. I think members need to bear that in mind when the allocation of blame is being looked at here. We've got to be fair, we've got to be realistic. I want to pick up on Mark Weston's theme though, because it's important that we not only learn about this from Bristol Energy, that's history, but we learn about it in terms of the context of the other things that the council is doing. Because each of the failings can be applied in other respects. Let's just look, going on right now. Bristol Beacon waiting in the wings to be our next financial problem. Gorham Homes business plan pulled from Cabinet 6 hours before the Cabinet this year rather than 10 days after for Bristol Energy last year. City Leap with no governance resolved. Heat networks needing more due diligence. Facilities management transfer to Bristol Waste, questionable. And councils never looked at the financial success of Bristol is Open. So we have to capitalise on this. We have to make it work. Members of the Green Party, particularly those who are inclined to support the Labour Party, I do hope you will now vote for this motion rather than against it. It's really important that we capitalise on what can be done to make this work better. And I just remind members, commercialisation is the only way we are going to find to generate the additional income we need to improve our services. There is enormous
20 seconds left, Councillor. Thank you.
Make this work better. So please vote for this resolution and let's make it work in a constructive and positive and non-political way. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to call upon Councillor Thomas to speak on behalf of the Green Group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. If the Bristol mayoral election had taken place in May 2020, the electorate would have been led to believe that the council's total losses on the Bristol Energy investment might have been no more than £20 million if the company was sold. Instead, with the postponement of the election, like a dodgy landlord's property, the full extent of the financial problems at Bristol Energy have broken through the fresh lick of Labour Party paint. And now we know that the true losses could be 3 times higher than was communicated a year ago. I welcome this Lib Dem and Conservative motion on behalf of the Green Group, and I welcome the auditor's recommendations as important steps in the right direction. At a risk of repeating myself, I, with a small number of other councillors, have been warning from the Cabinet meeting in 2015, when Bristol Energy was set up, about the over-optimism of the business plan, the structure and oversight of the business, and the company's inappropriate levels of secrecy. Right up till now, and there's still uncertainty over its final sale price, Greens have been pushing for greater transparency and asking questions at every opportunity. Greater openness would have meant that problems with Bristol Energy would have been identified and communicated earlier, and suitable corrective action could have been taken. Hopefully, some of these sorts of mistakes can be avoided in the future in the Council's other commercial enterprises. There are, however, questions raised about the adequacy of the audit process here. While it's excellent that Grant Thornton are now sounding the alarm about Bristol Energy, only a year ago, they were saying in their audit value for money report relating to the 2018-19 financial year, based on the work we've performed to address the significant risks, we are satisfied that the Council had proper arrangements for securing economy, efficiency and effectiveness in its use of resources. By the time that Grant Thornton was making that glowing value for money report, 99% of the money lost on Bristol Energy had already been spent. This was a thoroughly inappropriate endorsement and raises levels of concern about the level of chumocracy between the Council, Grant Thornton and the other big consultant firms. These firms are highly incentivised not to give damning reports as they know where their next job is coming from. My final point is it's not just in the Council-owned companies that secrecy is a problem, or a failure to listen, or a lack of action. There are other parts of the Council, which other speakers have referred to, where this is also the case and further improvements are needed. In summary, I think this motion is a helpful and important step in improving the culture of Bristol City Council so that these sorts of mistakes can be avoided in the future. I ask you to support this motion.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Carey to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group. Councillor, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. The Mayor has quite rightly said that when Bristol Energy was formed, he wasn't involved with the council and it's not his responsibility. So when he volunteered himself to stand as a candidate for the mayoralty, he didn't investigate what it was he would be taking on. He just put his name forward, closed his eyes to all that was going on within the council. Perhaps he didn't expect to be elected. Goodness only knows there are plenty in this chamber who fit that billing. So having surprisingly then been elected, the mayor now has to quickly start learning about being what a mayor is all about. Not having carried out the basic apprenticeship for any job in local authority politics, i.e. a period as a councillor, the mayor has a lot to learn. This did not stop him, though, from appearing in photo shoots with lots of coloured balls promoting this wonderful resource of Bristol Energy. Fast forward a few months to 2017, and already cracks are beginning to appear in the concrete of Bristol Energy. So much so that Bristol City Council engaged independent consultants to look at future options for the company, one of which was to sell it. In January 2018, the cracks are getting bigger and the company's business plan is rejected. In April 2019, it is obvious that the company is, I am quoting here, not viable. Still, we were piling Bristolians' hard-earned monies into keeping this company going. Roll the clock back 30 years or thereabouts, Bristol City Council owned and operated a docks and an airport, neither of which were particularly profitable because the council did not have the expertise to run these companies. And so both were sold off. And to prove that point, both made significant profits within the initial 12 months of the new ownership. This report implies that the Bristol City Council, led by the Mayor and the Labour Party, have been very poor managers of this company. The language used in this report is the sort of thing one might read concerning a cowboy bunch of builders who have ripped off the purchasers. I don't know if the Mayor is a good leader of a business. I've never led one myself, so I can't comment. However, the wording of this report suggests he has not done a very good job in examples listed here. Despite his best endeavours, serious doubt must be cast on his suitability as a leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to call upon Councillor Brain to speak on behalf of the Labour group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Most people seem to be looking into the past here, which is, we have to analyse the past and we have to find out what went wrong. Of course we do. But The part of this motion that I would like to address is the later part of the motion with regard to the Grant Thornton 12 recommendations on information availability. I'd like to thank Suzanne Audrey for her persistent appearance at the Audit Committee. I think she's been of value to us, and similarly, Clive Stevens. I agree with everything he said in his statement, and possibly the shortest Clive Stevens statement I've ever witnessed, and he is missed already. But turning to the later part, the 12 recommendations, as is well known to anyone who's been paying attention to full council, the Audit Committee has been in a bit of a struggle with this one, not amongst themselves. All parties on the Audit Committee have been united in the need for access to information, and there has been resistance to that in terms of legal advice that we've been provided with. And at the last Audit Committee, it became clear that the recommendations of the external auditors, Grant Thornton, and the advice of the legal team were in conflict. And we were in a situation where we had to try and resolve that conflict, and that was quite difficult. A plan was come up with in which the chair and the vice chair would consult on that. But I welcome this motion. The early parts are a bit florid, I have to say, but I welcome this motion from Councillor Hopkins and Councillor Gollop in setting up a joint committee between Audit and OSM to ensure that the recommendations are carried through, because as I say, we have had this resistance, and I think the public need to know that councillors are able to access the documents that they need in order to do their work properly. We cannot have a situation like we had where councillors during the lockdown in March were asked to go into a council office to look at a document, not take notes, and also actually, not enter into the spirit of the lockdown. Several councillors had 20
seconds
problem.
left, thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So I heartily welcome this motion, and I shall certainly be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to call upon Councillor Galandris to speak on behalf of the Conservative group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Bristol Energy, what a calamity. Calamitas horribilis maxima. Sometimes only Latin will suffice. Bristol Energy will go down in local government history as one of the worst financial disasters ever seen. What happened is appalling, but it would be even more appalling if no lessons are learned and better civic governance does not result. We need to adopt and implement all the recommendations of our external auditors unreservedly and without delay. And it appears from what I'm hearing that there is a Damascene conversion on the part of the Labour Party, which I welcome. The simple fact is that our existing financial checks and balances were insufficient to prevent millions of pounds of taxpayer money being poured down the drain. Sometimes corporate failure comes out of the blue. Pandemic, fire or flood can cause sudden havoc to even the best run businesses. However, the demise of Bristol Energy was entirely foreseeable. Opposition councillors and other independent stakeholders repeatedly made it clear that Bristol Energy was a disaster waiting to happen. Warning after warning was issued, and if the Mayor had heeded these warnings earlier, our losses would have been much, much smaller. I've read many audit reports of failed companies over the years. The reports are indeed written in genteel accountant's jargon, but this report is a little bit different. I've never read a report quite as blunt and as direct as this one. The Council's complete failure of corporate and civic governance screams out through the report's pages, and I can't do any better than to quote some extracts from the report. And here goes. The information and papers provided at Cabinet did not clearly state the risks faced by Bristol Energy. Cabinet was not made aware of concerns raised, including the fact that the independent shareholder advisor was recorded as being unable to support the business plan. The exempt financial report was out of date. To sum up, my Lord Mayor, Unreserved support for this motion is the only legitimate atonement and morally correct response to this damning report. Financial calamities do happen. What is vitally important is that we learn from our mistakes and improve for the future. I'm delighted to see that there appears to be cross-party support for this motion, and I implore everyone in this chamber, whatever their party, to do the right thing for Bristol, to ensure we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, and to vote for this motion and to accept the recommendations of our independent external auditors. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to call upon Councillor O'Rourke to speak on behalf of the Green Group. You have 3 minutes, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Despite what's been said this evening, there was never any possibility of the Green Group not voting for this motion. What I did try to do was to bring an amendment to it because I wanted to make it better. I wanted the outcomes of this evening's debate to be improved because I wanted scrutiny to be improved. The Grant Thornton report does say that scrutiny is inadequate. I come from a schools background. If an Ofsted was judged as inadequate, the school goes into special measures, an extensive programme of improvements is put in place, and these improvements are carefully monitored. So I think that analogy works very well for what we need here. So that's why in my amendment, I asked to add a second objective. I wanted a temporary panel to be set up for 6 months so that they could do a full review of all scrutiny. I really want to make it noted to people that the Grant Thornton report is purely a value for money report, which means that it's just post scrutiny. I think that we need to really have a full look at how we do pre-scrutiny and scrutiny of policy. And that's being omitted in several occasions. Again, if you look at the transfer of the FM contract, that's something that should have come to scrutiny, and members would have wanted to review that. Systems of governance in the city have been changing ever since the mayoral model was adopted. And the way we are commercialising is changing at a great pace, and that's not all bad. But it's quite clear that democratic oversight is sort of being left behind. And the Grant Thornton report makes that clear if you read the 12 recommendations. So I will be voting for this motion tonight, but I just wish that it had been considered more carefully and a bit more rounded. I would accept the report of the recommendations, definitely, but Bristol could and Bristol should do better. And I would ask the Mayor to recommend setting up of this task and finish group to review all our government processes so that citizens can be confident that there are sufficient checks and balances and that democratic accountability is brought in line and up to date with the changes that this system has brought about. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to call upon Councillor Khan to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group. Councillor, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Thus far, we haven't seen any willingness of administration coming forward and approaching other councillors, other parties to have some discussion on this. We are having this meeting only because councils ask, other parties ask, requested, and as a result, we are having this meeting. So, my Lord Mayor, this report has many important recommendations, and of course, the motion also has important recommendation. However, recommendation doesn't work as an alternative to ibuprofen. This is an excruciating pain, and it's need real remedies. Just for the record, we know it's also in the report that this company was set up to serve Bristol City and not becoming a national company. So I don't know whose decision was that. And its report says, as a result, the information and papers provided at the January 2020 cabinet did not clearly stated the risk faced by Bristol Energy provided sufficient or robust information to enable cabinet to make informed decision. Obviously, the question is who didn't provided the the documents, and why not? Was the question asked, and when, and if it was asked, what was the answer? If you look at the trend from 2017, as it's expanded on the report, it was suggested that it would be better, some suggestion that the company could be sold. By that time, I think it would have been 19 million or so, 20 million. And the suggestion was that that could have been recovered. My God, whatever would have been the proceed from that sale, that would have been better than what it is today. So the horror story in front of us. In January 2018, Bristol Energy 2018-19 business plan was rejected in the cabinet because the increase to maximum, the expense increased to maximum nearly 45 million, and PCG in the region of 40 million. Why?
You have 20 seconds left, Councillor. Thank you.
They are not taking any action. My Lord Mayor, simply what I can explain is that, you know, we all know about horse riding. Most of us know about horse riding. When you're trying to ride a horse without saddle, that's called, you know, bareback riding. And for that bareback riding,
close, please.
You need technical and practical understanding. So there was huge lacking of practical and technical understanding of this company.
Can you draw to a close now, please, Councillor?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. We will support the motion.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to ask Mayor Rees if you'd like to speak on the motion. If you do, we have allocated 3 minutes to you. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for that last presentation. In many ways, it pulls together kind of the challenges. I don't know where you got the idea that it was a profitable out, and some of the numbers you pulled together were quite interesting. Look, again, I take Mark Weston's point about learning lessons, and there are lessons to learn, but they won't be learned if we just interpret this for our own political ends. The lessons have to be learned outside the period of time as well, in which this governance review, this government review covers, and the whole business. There are people who have spoken this evening who have been very explicit in their opposition to local authorities owning commercial companies, who are now saying everything would have been okay. I mean, it's remarkable the backflips people are going through. We do need to learn a lesson, and one of the lessons is you've got to be very careful about the markets you enter into. The energy market is not a good market for a local authority to start a company and to get into. As a group, we are accepting the report. No report is perfect, and we have lots of questions about it. For example, the need for timely information, the need for a full council process to run itself out, as well as the need to operate in a volatile, quick changing market. So council processes and quick decision making are not two things that go together. These two things are recommended in the report. Now, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, you know, we'd recognise that. Listen, I know there are reputational, professional reputations on the line. There are people who professionally should have known better, who have time and time again shown themselves to have not performed better. And to, again, I think away from the performance of full council, councillors will all be looking at some of those councillors and knowing that professionally they should have known better. So, I mean, there's obviously some, it takes a big, it takes a deep breath to stand up and still to portray yourself as a professional. But this is not a good situation we were handled. I think a number of people wish the report said something that it doesn't. The report simply goes for 1 year. It talks about governance, and as I said, there's a challenge in us operating a commercial company. It doesn't talk about the decision making. I've talked about our relationship with the consultants that we brought in to try and help us, as you said, Councillor Khan, pulling in the expertise we did not have in a local authority to guide decision making in and of itself in the energy business. It does not talk about that decision taking. It talks about
you have 20 seconds,
which is separate. I mean, there's enough to say, you know, the scrutiny system was redesigned under Anna Klanowski when she was here. it was designed by councillors. But wrong business. We worked incredibly hard to make the best of it. But yeah, let's all stand up and take responsibility for the decisions that we all made in the course of this company's existence. I would absolutely welcome that. And that's why we've called for a public interest review, because we will then have that full history of the company and everyone who made decisions in the course of this company's existence put in the public domain. I'd absolutely welcome that.
Thank you very much indeed. And I apologise, I called the Mayor a councillor. My apologies, Mayor, for doing that. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Hopkins. Would you like to respond to the debate as the mover of the substantive motion? Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you all those in anticipation who've said that they will be voting for this motion. It doesn't solve all our problems, but it does move us forward a little way, and it hopefully reduces the chances of this happening again. It's technically absolutely correct that this report is for 1 year and for value for money limited scope. Having said that, a year ago, we actually pressed for a full inquiry into Bristol Energy, and it was voted down. So I'm glad that Labour councillors are now agreeing that we need to move forward, but they bear responsibility because we actually started off in this with rose-tinted glasses from the previous mayor and for this mayor in the early stages. It then went into panic and indecision, and it finally finished up with cover-up. And that really is not a situation that we should have within a city council. In terms of the review, the public interest review, all three opposition leaders wrote for that some while ago. And then in answer to questions from Councillor Kent, the mayor said he'd actually called for this. The day afterwards, the chief executive confirmed that he'd only agreed to that after getting Councillor Kent's questions and had not called for it at the same time as we had. So I'm afraid I've heard lots of encouraging words from members from all sides. I still do not hear the mayor accepting responsibility and committing to work with others to make certain that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. So I welcome members from all parties who are showing the right way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We will now move to the vote. The motion, it will be displayed on the screen now. This will be a roll call. You are voting on the motion on the table and the names will be read out in alphabetical order. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Abraham. Councillor Don Alexander.
For.
Councillor Leslie Alexander.
Sorry.
Councillor.
For.
Councillor Beach.
For.
Councillor Bowden Jones. Councillor Bradshaw.
For.
Councillor Brain.
For.
Councillor Bolton.
For.
Councillor Brooke.
For.
Councillor Breckles.
For.
Councillor Carey.
For.
Councillor Cheney.
For.
Councillor Barry Clark.
For.
Councillor Stephen Clark.
He's had to leave and send his apologies.
Councillor Clough.
For.
Councillor Comley.
For.
Councillor Craig.
For.
Councillor Chris Davies.
For.
Councillor Mike Davies.
For.
Councillor Denyer.
For.
Councillor Dudd.
For.
Councillor Eddy.
For.
Councillor Fodor.
For.
Councillor Godwin.
Helen's had to leave. She's had technical issues. She sends her apologies. I did put it in the chat.
Thank you. Councillor Goggin.
For.
Councillor Gollop.
For.
Councillor Goulandris.
4.
Councillor Hants,
4.
Councillor Hickman,
4.
Councillor Hiscott,
4.
Councillor Holland,
4.
Councillor Hopkins,
4.
Councillor Jackson,
4.
Councillor Jammer,
4.
Councillor Johnson,
4.
Councillor Jones,
4.
Councillor Keane,
4.
Councillor Kent,
4.
Councillor Khan, Councillor Khan,
Sorry,
Councillor-
4.
Councillor Kirk,
4.
Councillor Lake,
4.
Councillor Lovell,
4.
Councillor Massey,
4.
Councillor Mead,
4.
Councillor Malias, Councillor Malias, Councillor Morris,
4.
Councillor Negus,
4.
Councillor O'Rourke,
4.
Councillor Pearce,
4.
Councillor Phipps,
4.
Councillor Pickersgill,
4.
Councillor Quarterly, Councillor Quarterly, Councillor Radford,
4.
Councillor Sargent,
4.
Councillor Shah, Councillor Shah, Councillor Smith,
4.
Councillor Thomas,
4.
Councillor Threlfall, Councillor Threlfall, Councillor Tinknell,
4.
Councillor Wellington,
4.
Councillor Weston,
4.
Councillor Whittle, Councillor Whittle,
4.
Councillor Windows,
4.
Councillor Wright,
4.
Mayor Rees,
4.
Councillor Quarterly is in the chat.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Threlfall, Councillor Shah, Councillor Malias, Councillor Khan,
4.
Councillor Gordon, Councillor Bowden Jones, Councillor Abraham.
Thank you very much indeed. As you can see on the screens, we have 58 for, 0 against and no abstentions. That concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you very much to all the councillors and all the other people who've attended the meeting today. The next meeting of full council will be held on the 23rd of February 2021, which is the budget full council, starting at 2 o'clock. Good evening. I'd like to wish everybody a good evening. Thank you. Have we gone? Oh, thank you. I'd like to wish everybody a good evening and thank you very much for attending this.